Musician Flea is best known as the bassist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but next week he'll add another title to his resume, published author. His new memoir is called Acid for Children, and it chronicles his unconventional childhood, also his relationship with Red Hot Chili Peppers frontman Anthony Kiedis. CBS This Morning co-host Anthony Mason sat down with Flea.
We were both apart from things, like both outcasts in a way, and our relationship is a strange one and a difficult one.
You say that you're opposite sides of the same coin. One's concave, the other's convex.
Yeah, I believe that. You know, it's sort of like, and I think that's kind of has a lot to do with how our band ended up being, having, you know, the power that it does have.
So CBS This Morning co-host Anthony Mason is joining me now to talk more about this memoir. That's a very interesting way to describe their relationship, because I had read, and the impression after reading about their relationship is I felt like they were almost sort of soulmates, like destined to sort of fit together, but they do in a weird way.
They fit, but in a weird way, and it's not a precise fit. There's friction, and he says in the book, there's actually no one who's ever really hurt me more than Anthony has, because he has the power to do that because they're that close. But there's no question that their meeting, you know, created, as you heard him say, essentially created the energy that would be the heart of the band. So it was a pivotal moment in his life when they met in school. They met actually when he was wrestling with another kid. They were fighting, and Anthony came over and said, "Lay off him."
Really?
Yeah, and the sort of the heart of their bond was they both, as he says, they kind of felt like outcasts. They were both relatively new to LA, and they were both, and this sort of core group of guys who'd make up the band in the beginning were all from broken homes, and they bonded over that.
It's so interesting because you look at them as rock stars and they're just so cool.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And to hear that they were not that cool.
No, he felt he was, in his view, he was the opposite of cool as a kid. He came to the U.S. from Australia. His father was worked for the government as a customs official and got posted in New York. So when he was about 5, his family came to the U.S. and they ended up living in the suburbs of New York in a town called Rye, which is, you know, very conservative, normal, as he said. And then all of a sudden his mother went off with her guitar teacher, who, as he says, was a junkie and a very kind of tortured soul. And they ended up living in the stepfather's, what became his stepfather's basement. You know, and so he had this very complicated relationship with his stepfather, because on the one hand he was very fearful of his temper, but it was his stepfather who taught him to love jazz. Because
that was his original love.
That was his. He wanted to be a jazz musician, and when he got to LA, the family moved to LA, and he took up the trumpet because his school had a trumpet. And he's like, you know, I'll do this. He wanted to be Dizzy Gillespie, and he actually entered a major band competition and won it. I mean, a trumpet competition and won it. Got scholarship money. So that was what kind of soothed his soul, if you will. But then he met Anthony, and he met Hillel Slovak, who taught him, who had his own band, and taught him to love rock and roll. And it was Hillel who said, you know what, my bass player ain't doing it. Why don't you learn the bass?
Wow.
And that's literally what made this happen. I mean, he starts to cry when he tells this story.
I find it interesting that he talks about Anthony being, you know, the only one that could hurt him that badly, because he had such a painful childhood. So I think that's saying something.
Well, he describes his mother as being quite remote. He said when they got older, they developed a close relationship. But he says, he flat out says, I don't remember my mother ever hugging me. And so she was a smart, beautiful woman, but he didn't have a deep emotional connection, which I think has sort of caused him to run wild when he first got to Hollywood. He said, I would be out all night at the age of 12, you know, all around the city.
So I think people should know, if they're looking for a book that's going to like chronicle the wild days of rock and roll, you're not going to get that here.
He deliberately said, I didn't want to write a rock star book. He wanted to write a book that touched on the vulnerabilities he felt as a kid, and he's done that. This book actually ends just as the Chili Peppers are coming together. But you totally see what caused this band in his childhood. It's fun, it's funny, it's lively, it's very well written.
So the guy that I see as, you know, a member of the audience is this guy who's like got all this energy on stage. I mean, you could almost watch, that's a great shot, because you could almost watch him and not listen to him play and be thoroughly entertained, right?
He's very dynamic. He's very dynamic, but he's also incredibly thoughtful and sensitive, and very self-aware. He knows he can lay out every mistake he's ever made for you, and try to explain why. And he spends a lot of time in this book, I think, trying to make sense of what happened to him. And I don't think he fully realized how painful his childhood was until he started writing it down.
He's been writing this for a while, hasn't he?
Yeah, he started at a period of time when he was off the road and sort of put it aside, and then he started. He's got a lot of things going on. They played the Pyramids earlier this year for the Red Hot Chili Peppers and a couple of other places, and he just got married a few weeks ago. So in between, he's putting out a book.
Wow. Well, it sounds absolutely fascinating. I'm really looking forward to your interview because he's. He's both mysterious, but also he puts it all out there on stage. Yes. So you almost feel like you know him, you know? Anthony Mason, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
You can watch Anthony's full interview with Flea on CBS Saturday morning. It streams at 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. Eastern right here on CBSN.